All right. How do you like it so far, Ryan?
Great. About what I was expecting.
Well, welcome to the mill house.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's it was great to have you call.
Yeah.
Being in town, we went on a little jaunt the other day.
That was a good hike.
Yeah, but let's just set the stage here. A lot of the people in the industry know who you are, the outdoor world. You and your brother brought Yeti to the table.
Yep.
And you guys innovated it and designed it. But what's really kind of interesting on the hike the other day, you said, you never get this. Jimmy Buffett called me. Unless you're Ryan Seiders, Jimmy Buffett does not call. Anyway, it's great to have you, and we'd like to get a little bit about your story.
Sure.
You're growing up in Texas and all. What about Aspen? Have you been coming here for a number of years?
Probably about, I would say 6 or 7 years ago, there was another family that had, the husband in that family had come up to Aspen during his college years and stayed up here during the summer. And so he always rented the same house right down the river here on the other side from Woody Creek. And so we stayed in that house, probably 3 or 4 years in the summertime and got to do a few float trips and the hikes and going into town and eating at the restaurants and stuff. And so that was my experience with Aspen, before this trip here,
So you like it, obviously.
Yeah, I like it. My brother has a house in Telluride, and I like it there a lot. We can get into Telluride.
We won't mention the name of that area.
Yeah.
We'll bleep that one.
It's kind of like Vail.
Well, actually, no, go to Telluride. Everybody go to Telluride.
What I like about it is I get there, I never get in a vehicle, and I got all these great hikes right from town. And there's some good hikes here, but just something about, having Roy there in Telluride and being able to do those hikes and never having to get in a vehicle. And when I come up to Colorado to get out of the Texas heat, I love doing the hiking and trying to do what I can to stay in shape,
It seems like over the last few years, Aspen's become the new Texas.
Yeah.
Houston's really moved here in a big way. I've got a bunch of friends from Houston, Carlos Duncan and a mutual friend of ours.
Sure.
His family's been here for a while, but there's a bunch of others.
Yeah.
2 years ago on the roundabout in the sign that said "Welcome to Aspen," they got rid of Aspen. They had "Welcome to Texas."
I saw that. I was here for that.
What is it? Did the word get out in Texas?
I
this
think
is where we're going to hang.
I don't think it's just Aspen. I think that there's more and more people moving to Texas, and I think that this time of year, July and August, they want to get out of the heat. And Colorado's fairly easy to get to. You can drive here, you can fly here, and I don't think it's specific to Aspen. I think it's just they want to get to Colorado, get to the mountains, get out of the heat in Texas. For those, particularly the end of July through August before school starts back up, it's just easy to get out and enjoy the weather up here because it's nice.
It's perfect. I got to say, thank you for helping us come together with Yeti. They're a great sponsor of the Mill House. But if you take a look at any platform, any relationship that you have, you pray you get such relationships with a company like Yeti, which I think is the most profound company in the outdoor space. Because I think, too, not only hunting and fishing, but I think it's more like a lifestyle because it's transcended hunting and fishing as well, right?
It definitely has. I mean, obviously, we can get into the story, but that's how we started in the fish and tackle industry, and we were big hunters also. But we never dreamed how it would spill over into all these different industries and lifestyles and become the brand that it has today.
Well, I think what's interesting, what comes to mind for me is in the movie Field of Dreams. The motto was "Build it and they will come." But I think with a lot of great companies, you need to have an angle to sell it. You can have the best product in the world, but if people don't know about it, it's not going to get out there. How did you guys come about with all your short films, which are unbelievable? And if anybody's interested to check out Yeti, the short films,
sure.
Oh my God. Especially the bear and the destruction. I think that was a big part initially to prove the durability of your product.
Yeah, that told a story. The whitewater kayaks, the rotational molded coolers, and you had to educate the people to why they were paying so much for a cooler. And so then if you educate them to your story, then they can go tell their friends, and they basically, it's the best word of mouth marketing. So, we started talking about how the coolers were roto-molded like a kayak. No one knows what roto-molded is, but if you explain it like a whitewater kayak going, and you show someone going over rocks and in the rivers and stuff like that, it tells a durability story. There's agency up in Montana that does the bear-proof testing, bear containers, and so we sent a cooler up there. I think they actually called us and said, hey, I think your coolers might qualify for a bear-resistant container. And it has up there in what, I don't know if it was West Yellowstone, but they have this big facility. They put it out there, put peanut butter and salmon in there, lock it up, throw it out there with their grizzlies for 2 hours. And if they can't get into it, you get certified. And we had to do a small cooler all the way up to the biggest one we make, and then they certified the whole line, and that tells the durability story also.
So they came to you.
They did. And
so this is not your creativity, the bear.
The bear was not, but we used it in our marketing. And
I was going to say, you're a fucking genius getting a bear ripping that thing around the garage.
Right. And so our early commercials showed the whitewater kayak. They showed the bear trying to get into it, and it just told that story. And even though there's a small percentage of people that are using these coolers camping in real bear country where it's required.
Right.
It sounds neat, and it tells that story, and it allows them to, tell their buddies about the cooler and tell your side of the story instead of them just making up stuff on their own.
Right.
Well, before we get into Yeti, I don't think many people know like your background in the whole. Right out of college, you created a fishing rod business, correct?
That's correct.
Was that your dad or you?
No, so that was me. So I was a customer of my dad. So to kind of back up, we grew up, in fifth grade, I moved that was in 84. We moved out 25 miles outside of Austin, and it was out in the hill country. And I was telling you about this on our hike the other day. We had access to 600 acres on a mile of Onion Creek right across the street from where I grew up. And we had that land leased growing up. And so my parents moved us. I was born in Houston. I have two younger brothers and a sister. They grew up in Austin. And so we had a lot of family in Austin. And they wanted to get us out back up to this area to kind of get us out of Houston and, try to keep us out of getting into drugs and stuff like that. My dad always says it kind of backfired with how we got into the hunting and fishing, we just went crazy with it. And so having all that access to, I started out with a pellet gun and rabbits across the street, and then, had Onion Creek there. We were fishing all the time. And then I was hunting, I went crazy on whitetail deer and spent, before school I would hunt, and after school I ended up quitting basketball because I'd get out of basketball practice and drive home and see all the deer out in the last 30 minutes before dark, and I just couldn't handle it anymore,
Tell me the story of the first time you ever went hunting.
You were
very, very young.
Oh, yeah. So, in Houston, when it would rain, we had these ditches out in the neighborhood, these ditches for draining the water off. And my parents said that when it would rain, I would stand at the door in my diapers waiting for it to stop and go out and catch crawfish in the ditches. And even through the time we left to come up to Austin, anytime it would rain, I was ready to get out there, and I pulled a red wagon behind me, and I'd catch all the crawfish I could, So I just had the hunting was in my blood. My granddad was a big hunter. My dad was a big bird hunter and fisherman, and it was definitely in my blood growing up, from as early as you can get. It was, it was just part of me,
Are you more passionate towards hunting or fishing?
I feel like probably hunting, but I feel like hunting's more like, like shorter seasons, you can fish year round. And so it's just like getting geared up for the hunting. But I would hate to have to give either one of them up. I love them both.
Well, if you bring Yeti to the table and sell it, you can do this.
Yeah, that's right. You can do whatever you want.
The rest of your life.
I always tell my son, he's about to turn 10, and I always tell him, if something happens to me, I want you to remember whitetail, quail, redfish, and tarpon. Those are the four things you need to remember.
Four pillars.
Yes, in the outdoor world,
So let's go back to you in school and college.
Okay.
Did you see an issue with the rods being made, or what?
No.
How'd you come up with that?
So to kind of back up, my dad was a a wood shop teacher out of college. He taught wood shop back in Houston area. In those days, they had a lot of money in that Houston area, and they had unbelievable wood shops. And he won all kinds of, with his students in middle school and high school, won all kinds of state fairs and stuff. And then he loved fishing, and he noticed that there was a problem with the coatings that when you wrap the guide on with thread, they were using varnishes back in the 70s. And so in 77, he started this company called Flex Coat, and it was epoxy coating, a clear, flexible coating for fishing rods. And basically every rod company in the U.S. or custom rod builder uses Flex Coat. And so it's a niche business, and it's a kind of a lifestyle type business that we grew up in. Our family vacations were based around, going to, the ICAST trade show a long time ago. It's called the AFMA trade show, and the fly tackle dealer. And so we just kind of grew up in the fishing industry. And so companies I looked up to back, 30 years ago or longer, by going to these trade shows, I always loved G. Loomis, Sage, St. Croix. Those were kind of like dream companies of mine,
Hardy.
Yeah, Hardy. All that stuff. Hardy was a little bit further out there for me.
That was before I got involved with the saltwater products.
That's right. And so,
do you fish Hardy now?
I fish G. Loomis.
Get the fuck
with a one piece Loomis is what I've been fishing for the Tarpon.
Well, if you want to get a good rod, I got one in my garage.
I really haven't tried the Hardy that much. I need to, but one of the things was I just grew up with
those brands.
With the brands.
We all did. Look, I was with Loomis for 20 years.
Yeah.
Until I got involved with Hardy and try to help them, grow the saltwater.
And down in the Keys, I see kind of a 50-50 mix of either Hardy or G. Loomis. It seems what I see most of,
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no problem. So, kind of growing up, going to those trade shows, seeing the different companies, seeing the fly reel companies, going to the fly tackle dealer show, and then seeing my dad's lifestyle, when we got off the bus, coming home from school, he was available to go do stuff. And he was always like encouraged us to do anything outdoors. If we got into anything, we would do it full blast, whether it was skateboards, we built a big 8-foot half pipe, or whether it was, fishing, going, back then we didn't have boats. My dad didn't own a boat back then. So we would go places where you could wade fish, and we would drive to Louisiana, fish in the surf. In the wintertime, we'd fish, off the sides of the road, catch redfish. And then, basically, if I needed money back then, I built fishing rods, middle school, high school, college. I built custom fishing rods to make extra money. I never mowed yards, did anything else. So the only thing I ever knew was building fishing rods. And then going to the trade shows, I would see these rod companies. It was like a dream of mine to have my own rod company and be a customer of my dad's, and I got to go visit these rod companies with him and meet everybody at the trade shows and stuff like that. So, I basically went to college, wanted to just graduate. I didn't, I found a degree. I ended up graduating from Texas A&M with a wildlife biology degree, and I enjoyed the degree, enjoyed going to college.
But throughout college, you knew what you were going to do.
100%.
Yeah, right.
When I got out, I wanted to build fishing rods. Right. And so I got out in the fall of 96 and, early 97, started this company called Waterloo Rods. And it was, I really enjoyed it. I went to some of my own trade shows, and there was a series of shallow water expos in Florida that I went to and would show my rods, met a lot of good people there. And I had this company. I built, casting and spinning rods for, shallow water coastal fishing, bass rods, because I was in the middle of Texas. There's a lot of bass fishing. And then fly rods, not a ton of fly rods, but I was always into fly fishing. So, and I had a lot of freedom and flexibility, but I never made too much money at it. And I learned a lot. And
was it just you?
It was me, and I always had one full-time employee. And we built 1,000 to 1,500 rods a year, and I could get by on that, but it would have been tough to support a family. And I wasn't really good at growing it. And in 2005, I had one of my best customers that bought not a store, but that bought rods from me. He would order rods from me all the time, and he was by far my biggest customer. He was moving from Austin down towards the Texas coast, and he asked if I would sell the company. And I I thought, I thought that was interesting, and he named a price, and it wasn't enough to get me interested because that's the only thing I'd ever done is build rods, and I just thought that's kind of flattering. But so that was probably like springtime of 2005, and then in like August of 2005, I was up late one night coating rods like I normally did after the guy that was helping me went home. I would stay up and coat rods and let them dry overnight with the flex coat on there. You rotated them to let them dry. And he called me and the phone rang. I answered, "Hey, this is Dan." He goes, "What would you sell that company for?" And so I named a price that I thought was high, and he said sold. And my heart just sank because I knew this guy was fucking serious. There's no getting out of it after I said sold, or after I named the price and he said sold.
Right.
But I knew it would, it'd be hard for me to save up that kind of money by building rods at my current pace.
Sure.
And so we closed about September 15th on the company, and it wasn't a lot of money, but back then to me it was. And my buddy was already up in southern Colorado hunting that public land elk. I drove up there, met him. I hunted 2 weeks with him in Colorado. And then I whitetail hunted. I went to Illinois that year, South Texas. I was just hunting, basically all 4 months there. And I got back from hunting, and January rolled around, and I'm like, what am I going to do now? And in 2002, to kind of back up a little bit, my youngest brother got out of college and he wanted to start his own company also. He messed around with shooting benches for a while, and then for like rifle shooting benches.
Right, sure.
And then he started manufacturing or rigging out really these aluminum boats for fishing the way we like to on the Texas coast. And we were putting igloos on these boats. You'd usually have one right in front of the center console and maybe one up on the front of it. And we were just tearing up the coolers every single trip. And in 2002, while I was at one of those shallow water fishing expos, I went into the Sunshine Ace Hardware in Naples, Florida, and I was with my buddy TJ, who sold saltwater flies, and he worked out of my little shop there for a while, and then went off on his own. And he sold flies to them. We walked in there, turned to the left, and there was this big pile of rotomolded coolers there. And I'm like, these look tough, unbelievable. So I called Roy and said, "You need to start putting these on your boat." And so he did, and he became a distributor for this company in 2002 and started selling these coolers. And I could see he was getting stressed out with, by 2005, he was busy distributing these coolers. And so anyway, the only class when I got to A&M, I felt like everybody was like, academically way up above. I was like at the bottom of the
You're being humble.
Yeah, no, I was. I promise.
Don't they wish they were all you now?
Yeah, right, exactly.
So anyway, the only class though that I'd ever done well in, and I'm a slow reader. My youngest brother's fairly dyslexic. I'm sure I am also, but not to his level. But I did really well in this, law class, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll go to law school. I need to do something to make some money. And January rolled around, January 2006, and I saw that Roy, I could see he was working hard. He already had a couple kids, or at least one kid by that point. And I could just tell that he was working hard and a little bit stressed out with his workload. And so I was done hunting. It was January. I called him and I said, "Hey, let me come help you out. And will you pay me $10 an hour to come work in the warehouse?" And he's like, "Hell yeah, come on down." And so I met him down at the warehouse, and I had my leftover, rod company money. I paid some taxes, bought a few stupid things, and had the leftover money. And so I started helping him, and we went over there. These coolers were manufactured in Thailand that he was distributing at the time. And so since he had his older brother with him, he's like, "Let's go over to Thailand and straighten these guys out." Because we never had enough product. And there was, over the 4 years from 2002 to 2006, he had learned what was wrong with that design. It was still, much improved over anything else we had at the time, but there was a lot of shortcomings in that original cooler that he was distributing. And so we got over there to Thailand, which was a stretch for where we grew up to go over to Thailand.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, it was a different world over there for us. But going together, it kind of gave us a little confidence,
Sure.
you know. And we got over there, and they didn't listen to anything we had to say. We kind of just ran into a brick wall right away. And
were you guys representing the company that he was repping for at the time?
Yeah,
trying to help that company make a better cooler?
So we were the U.S. distributor, and for this company that was selling coolers into the Australian market.
Right.
They sold some coolers to like street vendors and stuff like that. But there was a company that that was selling into the Australian market. And then we were, you know, Roy had worked his way up from, you know, he quickly realized that he could make money selling coolers, and he was losing money building boats, you know.
Right.
And so
you went on behalf of the company. This is not even like, okay, let's maybe go over there and see what we can build on our own.
No, this
that was
just
not there yet.
No, this was not there yet. This was pre-Yeti. This was like, hey, we can make money selling coolers, but we need to get these guys in Thailand to understand that we need more product and we need some improvements on the design. And we got over there, and they weren't open to listening to Roy's ideas, you know. And so Roy had another contact in the Philippines that had just reached out to him and said, hey, I see what you're doing in the U.S. with coolers. I'm a manufacturer. You may view me as a competitor, but all I care about is manufacturing coolers. He was an Australian guy that had moved to the Philippines to manufacture, because that was his love, was manufacturing. And so just kind of, you know, we ended up, while we were in Thailand, say, hey, we're going to go travel around. That's what we told the Thailand guys. And we ended up booking a flight to the Philippines. It's a 3-hour flight over there for us. You know, coming from out in the country outside of Austin, you know, you're reading in big red letters, death to drug traffickers and stuff like that. You know, it freaked us out a little bit. And so Ivan was the guy's name in the Philippines.
Why would it freak you out if you're not carrying drugs?
Well, it just like it just was like a different world, you know. It wasn't the U.S. anymore.
I get it. Yeah,
from the hill country of Texas. Come on, man.
And so anyway, Ivan picks us up with his wife Gloria, who was you know, from the Philippines, and picks us up in a Isuzu Trooper, and we start driving out of Manila and out to the old Clark Air Force Base, where this was now it was turned into an economic zone where there was manufacturing going on. And because the U.S. shut down their Air Force Base there after a volcano went off, I think. And so we're driving out of town. Well, to control the traffic there, you have to have an even or an odd license plate, you know, to come into town that day. We had the wrong license plate. So you got these kids with machine guns trying to stop us. Ivan's kind of arguing back with them. You know, we'd get up some speed, and, you know, someone would step in front of us with a gun. He'd go around them, and then we finally got away. Yeah, and it freaked us out, you know. But luckily, you know, having your brother there, it helped out, and we get over there, and we get to see the manufacturing facility. Was clean, much different than Thailand. And what was different about it was Ivan was listening to Roy's ideas on how to manufacture cooler. Ivan was also selling into the Australian market, and Australia was way ahead of the U.S. on coolers because, you know, Igloo and Coleman and Rubbermaid, you know, all the value had been engineered out. It was all about cost, selling to Walmart and Academy and stuff like that. And so it was just the cheapest cooler possible was built in the U.S. But if you take that cheap cooler and ship it over to Australia, it's expensive by the time it gets over there. So they were a little bit better at buying more expensive stuff over in Australia. And so, you know, basically Ivan, you know, listened to Roy's ideas. He already had a basic cooler design that we could start modifying to Roy's, you know, kind of dream of what a cooler should be. And by the time we left the Philippines to fly back to Thailand, then back home, you know, we decided, you know, forget this company in Thailand. We're going to start our own business and, you know, start our own brand name and do this from scratch. And I mean, it was like flying out of Manila. It was like a light bulb.
We got to do this.
We got to do it.
Who said that first?
Well, Roy probably, yeah. And
is he smarter than you?
He's, you know, growing up with him. I would have
you
said
come
that.
to the but you come to the table with certain things.
Yeah,
you know, and
he
sometimes
really
you have a you know, somebody who's that creative guy, and the other guy can do something else to help facilitate, you know, that little team.
Yeah, he is super creative, and over the years watching him, with his involvement in Yeti, it was really impressive. Having grown up with him, and then have him, as Yeti continued to grow, keep up with all the different functional areas of the company. It blew me away.
So what part of the company were you?
So Roy had kids at the time, so he wasn't, he couldn't travel as much. So he was all into design and running the office back at home, and he was real driven. And I had all these relationships from building fishing rods, like with Flip and these guys, and going to all the trade shows. And so I would load up a van full of coolers and drive out to a trade show in Vegas or whatever, eventually start shipping coolers. And so I was involved in the sales and marketing. And as we got started, there was a void. You go into any sporting goods store there is, that like in Austin, there was a sporting goods store called McBride's. Well, everybody that comes in there is a cooler user, but McBride's can't sell coolers and make money. So there was because they're cheap. They could go buy them at Walmart cheaper than they could buy them through their distribution network. So everybody coming into all these hunting and fishing stores, use coolers, but no one sold them. So there was a void on the shelf. And when we come out with a high dollar cooler and show the retailer how they could make $100 selling a cooler, well, once they see that they sell, they start listening pretty quick and make room for the coolers on the shelves.
How'd you come up with the name Yeti?
So about to ask that.
Okay, so when we were leaving the Philippines on the plane, Roy and I are sitting next to each other. We start coming up with names, and Yeti was one of the 10 names we came up with.
What were the others?
I could maybe remember a few of them, but none of them stuck. That's for sure. Right. So what we did is we made this list of 10, and Yeti being the kind of the Bigfoot of the Himalayas, cold, harsh, environment, tough. It just kind of fit, And so we get back to Texas and start asking our friends and family, hey, what do you think about these names? We're starting our own company. And whether they liked Yeti or not, we came back to them a couple weeks later, a month later. The only name they could remember of those 10 was Yeti.
Smart.
And I always liked on Sage Fly Rods, I always liked that name. It was simple, 4 letters. Right. It looked good on a hat. And I wanted something that, and I never really liked the name G. Loomis, because everybody wanted to talk to Gary Loomis. And so you wanted to build a bigger company, you wanted a name that was bigger than the person behind it.
Right.
And so Yeti just stuck, and I didn't know how it was going to be received we had a lot of real redneck, country guys and Yeti, the way they would say it and stuff like that. And so, but it was, it was well received, and it was easy to remember. And I think it was a big part of our success. Had we had another name, I'm not sure that it would have been. I mean, we might have got there, but and we started selling these, trucker, or not selling, but giving away these trucker hats. Anytime someone would have a retail sale, we had plenty of profit built into that cooler. We're throwing a hat in the cooler as we ship it out.
Hat and T-shirts. That's what I read.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Cool. During this process of creating Yeti, how many fights did you get in with Roy?
When we set up the company, I had my money that I invested from the rod company into this deal. And we went to a kind of a family friend that we'd grown up with. There was a lawyer there where we went to high school. And we said, hey, let's set up this company. We want to have it 50-50. And the lawyer was like, oh, that's a terrible idea. You need to have a decision maker. So it was 50.5% Roy, 49.5% me. And we hardly from 2005 to 2012, when we sold it the first time, we hardly had a crossword. I mean, he did drive me pretty hard. Like, he was more serious than I was about working hard. And
you were hunting and fishing.
I was doing a lot of that.
What would your life been like without Roy?
I don't know. I don't think I ever would have. I wasn't driven like Roy was for, like, Roy could see more the kind of light at the end of the tunnel.
He was a visionary.
I think so. Yeah, he was more of that. We both knew we wanted to own our own company, and we were only used to my dad's company, Flexcoat, where he wore all the hats. He was, he was involved in everything, and it was more of a lifestyle type company. But from the beginning of Yeti, it was growing so fast the entire time that you could always say that, hey, you might be able to sell this thing and never have to work again. And that was kind of appealing too, the way we like to hunt and fish. If you could potentially make enough money to not have to work anymore, well, then you could do more hunting and fishing, And what we really lucked out with Yeti was the market size with coolers and basically anything outdoors, because our vision was just fishing and maybe a little bit of hunting, sporting goods stores, but we just didn't realize how big the market was, for products like Yeti offers for the outdoors.
You know what's interesting as a purchaser of products, whatever it be, fun things, work things, you always know what you want to buy. It's always the best, but you might not want to afford it at that point. Yeah. So you don't buy it, you buy something else. And then a matter of 6 to 8 months down the road, you end up buying twice because you end up buying the best after the fact.
Yeah.
And I've seen that with a lot of things in my life. So I think that transformation for everybody's consciousness to buy the best initially, and the difference is a lot, but yet it's still a cooler.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're buying a boat.
That's right. And that's something my dad always, supported us in when we were getting into, we always build the best fishing rods. We'd always buy the best Shimano reels or best fly reels.
You buy once and you're done.
You're done. And he always supported. We didn't have a ton of money growing up, but we were, upper middle class, and we were always buying the best stuff. And as much time as I thought about hunting and fishing, basically I wanted the limiting factor to be me. I didn't want it to be my equipment,
Right.
And I didn't want to have to ever think about question my equipment that I had. And so I was just like, from a very, very early age, I was obsessed with always having the best stuff for my outdoor activities,
From an outsider looking in, I would say personally, thinking about Yeti, your greatest success was your marketing, because I first heard of Yeti from Flip.
Yeah.
In his TV shows, and him pulling the boat, off the casting platform and talking about wildly stronger, keeps ice longer.
Yeah.
I mean, how important was Flip in this growing stage?
So incredibly important. So, through my rod building days, I met Flip through going to these trade shows, and I would go around and get, find all the guys that I liked at these trade shows at the fly tackle dealer and stuff like that, and get to know them. And I would always offer to build them a fishing rod. And, another thing about the cooler business, there was also a void with sponsorships. You could go get anybody you wanted to just by sending them a cooler and it's a high-end cooler and stuff like that. But Flip, I forget, I do remember the trade show where I met him back when I was in high school, probably. It could have been college, but anyway, at this trade show, that he's always sponsored by a rod company. It's, the normal stuff is hard to get into. If you had a rod company, a real company, Flip was already sponsored. So what I did is I said, hey, I build custom rods. Is there anything you're missing? And he got all fired up on this 5-foot plug rod. And he started explaining no one builds a 5-foot plug rod anymore. And he started talking about the tip speed and how you can fight fish, shorter fulcrum and stuff like that. And so I started building him a couple of these 5-foot plug rods. And after that, me and Flip were big buddies. I go to Florida. He had loaned me his canoe to go, me and TJ, who built the flies, and kind of point us in the right direction and go discover stuff on our own. And so Flip was just a great resource for me. Invited me before Yeti, invited me on a turkey hunt in Texas and you got to hang out with him shooting his recurve at turkeys. And we did some shotgun stuff also. And it's just fun to hang out with him. Well, by the time that I was friends with him and friends with a lot of people in the industry, but when we started Yeti and we started getting into doing some print advertising, the very first advertising we did, I called Flip and he's like, yeah, what can I do for you? I sent him a cooler and said, hey, we need some sort of testimonial from you, some sort of quote. And he came up with the perfect one right off the bat. He said something about he's been buying coolers his entire life and he's found, he's done now. And he had a couple Spanish words he threw in there. And he goes, I have Yeti now and I'm done buying coolers.
He flipitized it.
Yeah, that's right. And so we had that little print ad. And then I met a guy I met a guy at the ICAST show, and at that time, ICAST and Fly Tackle Dealer was all one show. And he said, Ryan, I've been walking around this show, the whole floor, and this is the only company that I really, kind of draws me in that I like the potential for. He goes, I love your product, but I don't think you're doing a great job of telling the story about why you would do this. And his name was Wal Larson from Scales Advertising, and he started telling me about the archery the bow hunting, companies he'd been involved with. And I was serious into bow hunting at the time. I knew every company that he represented.
And that was like Rage, Cuddyback, right?
All that, yeah. And so as soon as he talked to me about bow hunting, I recognized him from the Cuddyback commercials. But he was involved in Matthews marketing, Rage, Cuddyback. And Rage is crazy. Broadheads have been around forever. And, I think it was Rocky Mountain that owned the technology of Rage. And he's like, oh, we need to change the name. And in 2 years, they took over half the broadhead market with the Rage. And so,
again, that's a name-related thing.
It is name-related, and had they brought out that broadhead under the Rocky Mountain brand, I don't think it would have been nearly as successful. Right. But you come out with a new brand, and you explain the story where they can go tell their friends of why they're using Rage. And he did that with, there's all kinds of targets, the Glendale buck and block targets,
right.
And some of the bow sites back in the day. Montana Black Gold was a popular bow site. And just everything he was involved with just seemed to be up at the top. And so what he did is help us kind of boil down our story and then encourage us to start advertising 2008 or 9 on outdoor television. And back then, that was a great outlet to advertise on. And we got Flip to do a commercial for us.
On walkers?
No, this was after walkers. This
right?
was after walkers. So, but what we did do is Flip got one of his, television film guys, to film this commercial with Walt's input and talking about how the cooler's rotomolded and how the ice lasts and how the cooler's bear proof. And you got Flip out there pulling his boat, standing on a cooler. And it just told the story. And it
gave you credibility.
It did.
Sure.
And Flip obviously had a lot of credibility within the saltwater fishing that I liked, And so it was a big deal. And Flip, did all that stuff, just because he wanted to.
If I'm not mistaken, when didn't you put like a piece of plywood on top of the cooler and use it as a casting platform?
So back in 2000, so when we first started getting into boats, before we started building boats, we have these aluminum boats, and we had an Igloo 94 mounted on the front of this aluminum John boat. And we had, since you stand on it, you're going to cave in the lid. We put a piece of, plywood on top of that and then coated it with Flex Coat, my dad's company, and put a little grid in there, probably some sand or something to give it some, where you wouldn't slip off
right.
of it. And, back before we had access to boats, I drove from Austin to the Florida Keys. My dad always had a van. And I'd have one buddy. I had this buddy, Dan Smith, in high school and early college, and then later switched over to my buddy, TJ. I drove to the Florida Keys 13 times to fish at night underneath the bridges.
For tarpon?
For tarpon.
Right. Or
whatever we could find, but we were mainly targeting tarpon. And mostly with a spinning or casting rod. We would have fly rods with us. We'd have a van full of rods, had 2 mattresses in the back. We would sleep all day in that heat down there. But if you get up at night and go below all these bridges, it was unbelievable what you can find at nighttime. And so we did that. And then finally got my dad into, helping us out getting boats. So we got this little John boat, got the cooler on top of it. And we had met, one of the nights we spent the night, near the Lorelei when back then the Florida Keys Outfitters was in that parking lot there. We'd spend the night in that parking lot.
In the van?
Yeah, in the van.
How hot was that?
Oh, it was hot at night and even hotter during the daytime because we wanted to fish at night, And we would find different places to park and sleep in the van and fish at night.
Like homeless.
Yeah, that's what it was like.
Homeless fishermen.
We didn't have the money to do anything else. So anyway, but every time we'd get out of school in the middle of May or, whenever we get out, and we'd go there for a week or 2 at a time. And walked into Florida Keys Outfitters, and Sandy was in there, and we were like, hey, we have enough money. We want to go out on one guided trip for bonefish. Do you have any recommendations? He goes, oh, this guy back here tying flies in the back, he's a new guide. His name was Diego Roulier. And so,
oh, that's right.
Yeah. And so
Diego, yeah.
So we went back there and talked to him while he was tying flies, and he was pretty young then. And he was a little bit older than us, though, because we were probably late high school, early college. Yeah, it had to be late high school. And And so and back then you're dealing with payphones. And so we called Diego, talked him down on his price. This is all the money we got. Will you take us out, And we went out we took fly rods and spinning rods the next day. And me and my buddy Dan both caught a bonefish on a spinning rod with Diego the next day. And then became big friends with Diego because I started building fishing rods, and Diego would invite us to spend the night at his house, to stay there if we needed a place to stay or whatever, just hit it off. And every time we'd come back after that, we'd save up enough money to go fishing with him one day, And so at the time, he eventually lived on Duck Key there, and we would rent a little place up, near Tavernier, and then we would keep our boat at Diego's house, our aluminum boat, and fish. Once we started getting serious into fly fishing, we would
just find out where Rob Fordyce is.
Well, we didn't know Rob at the time. We didn't know Rob, but we started fishing around Duck Key, and then we'd go out and we found that just on the front side of Duck Key, we'd run out, back up towards Islamorada. We found this big white spot.
The Tarpon Highway.
Yeah. And so we'd get out there early and anchor up, and we would, we couldn't pull that damn boat, but we'd get up there, stand on top of that igloo and cast a tarpon coming by. Well, here comes each day, this guy would keep coming and getting in front of us out on the white spot and be able to pull to these fish and end up cutting off what we thought were cutting off. We didn't know the rules. We didn't realize what we had found there.
So you weren't yelling. You weren't yelling at him.
No, we weren't at first. But
was he yelling at you?
No, not at first. And so eventually, after he pulled way around to cut off some fish that were coming to us because we couldn't pull, TJ raised up his hands and like, "What are you?" And then it didn't know it was Rob at the time, and we didn't know who Rob was.
The big Rob Fordyce.
Yeah. Oh man, he started yelling back at us. We were like, "Ooh," he's in a muscle shirt, and we knew we were outside of our. This was in '96 that we did this, and we were in. You can bleep this out, but we were at the. We didn't have any idea that we were at one of the best places in the Keys.
Tarpon capital of the world.
Yeah,
don't go there, anybody, because. These big guys still live there.
That's right. And so
that is so funny.
But when I started fishing with Rob in 2012, he invited me to fish with him in Texas, and then invited me to start fishing tarpon with him in the Keys. We put that story together. He remembered us out there, and
Well, let's go back real quickly because I want to continue this relationship with Rob. Okay. But the Yeti, you put that wooden plank on top of the Yeti, and that became
of the Igloo.
Yeah. But that was originally of the Igloo.
Yeah, so that was back in '96 before we even had a thought of the cooler company. We always were just trying to figure out how to make stuff better and work, So
when you got the Yeti, you didn't need that piece of wood because the Yeti was strong enough.
And so 2002 is when Roy started messing with higher end coolers, and 2006 is when we decided to just start our own company.
Right.
But we had been playing around with coolers since '90, modifying our own igloos since '96.
Because nothing was working.
That's right. They were just so cheap and would just fall apart.
And the wood plank was because when you stood up there, it would cave in.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, we got a great picture of that that's still around.
It's the best photo. I love that photo.
I love that. Right in front of Rob Fordyce.
I'm going to ask you for it because I'm going to put that up.
I'll get it. But that photo, that was TJ and I, and that was right out in front of Duck Key there. And a storm was rolling in. Got out my Nikon. I'm standing on the cooler. You see these real dark clouds out in front of you. My pants are blowing hard in the wind, and we took that one picture. I'm standing there with my 12-weight fly rod, an Able reel with an offset hand. I mean, it's just back in the day, the way things were. And we actually, hooked up to some oceanside fish there, and we never did land any to the hand. But, me and TJ spent 2 weeks out there on that trip, just every day, getting up early.
Casting all day long.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's unbelievable how many fish you see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good for you. Well, it's kind of interesting because moving on now from the Yeti and your relationship with tarpon happened a long time ago. How did you first start to see these fish and have this appeal to catch them?
I think probably, thinking back to watching Walker's Cay, watching Flip on television, hearing that music start up at the beginning of the show and seeing all these cool fish he was catching. And I love saltwater fishing, love redfish, and that's what I knew about. But hell, I wanted to go do this, tarpon and snook and all, bonefish and all that kind of stuff, So that's probably, and I read a lot of magazines back then, but I think it was Walker's Cay that just kind of pushed us over the edge to go kind of crazy. I mean, Flip's been a big influence in my life and Roy's and all my buddies.
Sure.
Still is now.
My life, Nikki's life. I
Yeah.
mean, how can you not have a life in fishing without having Flip as a part of it?
Yeah, I remember one time when I was on one of those turkey hunts with him, we would go and throw out a drift sock and just drift across the flat and throw top waters and stuff like that. And he said, Ryan, you need to start poling. You're just drifting aimlessly like a tumbleweed across the flats instead of picking out where you want to go. And I always
Perfect Flipism.
Yeah, I remembered that, drifting like a damn tumbleweed, So anyway.
Well, let's jump ahead. Yeah. So here you are cutting Rob Fordyce off at his favorite fishing hole.
Yeah.
And now
hold on, they were there first. Come on.
We would get there before him, but that didn't mean anything. We didn't know the rules.
So you jump ahead. Now you're fishing with Rob in all the tournaments. You finished second in the Gold Cup, which is the biggest tarpon tournament there is.
Yeah.
You won the Golden Fly. How did that relationship from a couple homeless fishermen cutting him off to becoming a good pal and winning tournaments with him?
Well, it helped. The whole Yeti deal helped out a lot. I'm not gonna. That was a big deal. So getting going with Yeti, we had Yeti going, and I, obviously met Rob through Flip over the years, and then one day I get a call from Rob about, hey, I'm guiding in Texas this summer. You want to come fish with me? Well, I meet him down at South Padre, and I was good at red fishing with a fly rod, and we just hammered them this summer. And I fished a couple days with him, and then so a couple months goes by, and he said, hey, Ryan, we're starting a new show called Silver Kings. And would you like to come to Florida and film a couple episodes with me?
Because that TV show, for the audience, it was a show based on filming the tournament.
That's right.
The Golden Fly tournament. And cameras would follow certain, guys, obviously Rob, and he owned the show, part owner of it.
That's right.
And then so you got onto the show with Rob.
That's right. And so I show up to the Florida Keys having never landed an oceanside tarpon to the hand, okay? I'd fished a lot, but had never landed a tarpon to the hand. And now, back in the Everglades, I'd done some of that kind of stuff, where we catch the tarpon. But I was, I thought I was good at fly fishing, but I didn't realize how this tarpon deal is. Like, I thought I could make fish eat. Well, I didn't realize
clear water tarpon are different.
Yeah, this oceanside tarpon is a whole different game of inches and pinching them. Redfish, you cast past them and bring it up and they eat it. And I didn't. I thought I was good, but I didn't realize what I didn't know. And so we have 2 days before the tournament, and he goes, "Hey, we're just going to act like we're in this Golden Fly tournament, and we're going to have a camera boat with us filming us the whole time." So we fished 2 days, and it wore me. I mean, there were so many fish coming through there. I'd never seen anything.
Were you at again?
We were at and up towards Isla Mirada. Several different places we stopped on there, but some of it was at.
So we went back to the old home hole.
That's right. I recognize this spot. And so anyway, I mean, I'm just worn out from casting to all these fish. I'm almost hoping another string doesn't come by. I don't think I've ever seen it that many fish since then. But anyway, so this was 2013, May of 2013, right before the Golden Fly. And the night before, we get off the water that day, and he says, "Hey, there's one spot available in the Golden Fly. Do you want to go ahead and fish it for real? Sign up." And I'm like, it's like $1,000. I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And we signed up for the tournament, and we ended up catching 3 weight fishes and a few releases, and Julian was up in front. We were watching him and Joe Rod the whole time during the tournament. We were fishing near each other. He ended up winning it. I think he had one more weight fish, but it was a high scoring tournament. And we ended up getting second the first time. And during that trip was my first time to ever land an oceanside tarpon.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And ended up getting second in the Golden Fly. So I was like, this tournament stuff is pretty fun.
But you know what? Let me clarify this here, because you're not a complete neophyte, because you had tarpon fished, but in the back, not on the sensitive oceans, clear water fish. So that relationship, I mean, you knew how to cast and knew how to fight fish, knew how to hook fish, but now all of a sudden you're in a tournament and you get second.
Yeah, and that says obviously a lot about Rob,
But also too, I mean, it's a team deal.
It is a team deal.
Were you nervous with Rob Fordyce and this tournament?
Well, I think the question is, did you understand like the history and how big these tournaments really were?
At the time, I don't think I did. I'd always walk in and see the Gold Cup trophy there, and I had read about all that kind of stuff, but I don't think I knew what I was getting into. And all I knew was that I thought I was pretty good at fly fishing for redfish, and some of these other guys I saw in the tournament, I was like, I got to be able to beat these guys, And then you get Rob pulling you around and grabbing the fish, and then have a couple good days come together, and it got me kind of hooked on this tournament thing. And I like fun fishing, I like the tournaments, but like on our hike the other day, what I was telling you is I like seeing these same guys year after year, and without the tournament, you don't fish as hard, you don't prep as hard, or Rob might all the time, but I like the kind of the
intensity.
I do like that, but I still like fun fishing also. But I like seeing these same people. And how I met you, Nick, you was at the tournaments. I wouldn't know you without going to these tournaments. But seeing these same people year after year and getting to talk to them, and there's 25 anglers, 25 guides you get to know.
And it brings you into another level, I think.
It does.
And I think, too, that fraternity is very important. Yep. These tournaments are the glue for the community and for the brotherhood of these tarpon fishermen.
That's right.
And you see the offshore guys, I think that they'd say the same thing.
I remember the first time we fished with Rob. I'm getting sidetracked, but I remember we asked him what he wanted for lunch, and he said roast beef.
A pound of...
No, hold on. And we go, okay, roast beef sandwich, no problem. He goes, no, just roast beef. We go, okay, how much? He goes, half pound. We're like, the fuck?
I said, are you serious?
Yeah.
He said, you think I'm fucking serious?
He's serious. He eats
no. He said no. He said, you think I'm fucking kidding?
Yeah. And if it's not during a tournament, he's getting up at 4:30, going to the gym, working out. I mean, I'm worn out after just fishing. He's pulling the boat all day.
Yeah.
He always asks if I want to get up with him. I don't get up with it when he gets up to go to the gym. So. But he stays serious about it.
Well, you made mention of something a little bit ago. You said that you spent some foolish money after you sold your rod company. Mm-hmm. What'd you buy?
I bought an over and under Beretta and a Rolex.
You made it. You hit the high.
That's
high.
Right.
So this was after selling
That's
Waterloo.
after selling Waterloo. Yeah.
Waterloo.
Yeah.
And by the way,
is this the Rolex you bought?
No, it was similar to this one, but it's just a stainless steel Submariner.
I mean, if you just all of a sudden you got all this money, it's like, why not? I mean, it's now you can treat yourself.
But just to clarify, you started this company in middle school?
No. I started building custom rods in middle school, high school, and college, and that was just like there was no brand associated with it. And then 2007 rolls around. I'm out of college December of 2006.
Okay.
Started Waterloo, sold it. It's still around today, and the guy that bought it has been way more successful than I was. They put some money into marketing, and it's still around. And on the Texas coast, I would say it's one of the most popular brands around on the Texas coast.
So
for sure.
that brings up another question.
Yep.
Go out of college, you create a fishing rod company.
Yep.
Created Yeti, which is probably the most established, well-known outdoor company of all time. What's next?
Well,
you're not even 50 years old yet.
He's going to go on a sheep hunt next week. That's what's next.
I got to get in shape for my sheep hunt. But no, I most important to me, I have 3 kids, and I want to, spend what time I can with them and make sure that they don't turn out to be fuck ups, and do what I can on that deal. And obviously, now, they're exposed to a lot of different things, and luckily my 2, I got a 10, 8, and 3. And, my 10 and 8-year-old, a boy and a girl, they love going to the ranches with me. Have employees at these ranches in Kansas and South Texas and stuff like that. And in Port O'Connor where we fish. And I like dealing, I have a wildlife background. I've always been obsessed with hunting and fishing. And I like messing with these ranches, improving the land, making them the best deer hunting, free range, low fence, whitetail hunting. That's what I was always into. And I had always read about these places in North American whitetail or wherever. And then when I got money from Yeti, I was able to go buy these places and put in my management plan with the help of other people. And that's one thing that was at Yeti, we always surrounded ourselves with smart people and we knew where Roy and I, when we needed someone to come in and do this and like the financial side or the operation side, we hired people we knew and that we knew were smart and capable, whether they had the background to that or not. And same thing with these ranches that I have now that I like working with and on, and trying to produce the best whitetails I can, the quail hunting and all that kind of stuff. So that's what keeps me busy now, is the kids and then these different places.
That makes total sense. But you're an entrepreneur from day one.
Yes.
Are your wheels still spinning?
No, not at all. For Roy, they are still spinning. But I more look at work as something to get you to a point to where you can do what you really want to do. And luckily, I had something that I loved, the outdoor industry, and, building fishing rods and meeting these people associated in the fishing tackle industry. And I remember seeing your dad. We were talking about it on the way over here. Maybe it was only 15, 18 years ago, something like that. But I remember seeing him at the trade shows I think it was with Hardy at the time. I can't believe it wasn't longer ago than 15 years. But, I remember seeing you walk around the trade shows with no hat, your hair going, and your boots, and going casting at the casting pond.
Pink pants.
Yeah. He was
always, look at that tool.
Yeah. But anyway,
okay,
you were gonna,
he did. He didn't answer. He said,
no.
You were going to use another word. Don't say that word.
But anyway, it was just, always enjoyed that whole industry. And I remember reading in the Fly Tackle Dealer magazine, they had an article about Yeti, and they said, my dream was to have a company, like one of these rod companies, like, for me, it was G. Loomis, Sage, St. Croix, and having a successful company like that. And so to see this really hit home when I read this in one of their trade publications. They said that, they were talking about the success of Yeti, and they said that, now Yeti sales are bigger, because we spread out, to all these different industries. Yeti sales are bigger than all the companies at our show combined.
Right.
And they said at the very end of the article, they said, don't forget where you came from. And that always just kind of hit home that, my dream was to have one of these companies, whether it was, I remember meeting, Ted at T-Bore Reels and Kristen Mustad at Nautilus, and, Gary Loomis. I used a bunch of G. Loomis blanks and St. Croix blanks. I knew all these different, company owners, and always wanted to have my own company, and to stumble into something that was bigger than the entire industry was
That's
just
crazy.
It absolutely mind-blowing.
That sentence right there, something that's bigger than the entire industry.
Yeah. And so I couldn't do it again. That's another reason with starting something else out.
Did it mess your head up in any way, this kind of success?
I don't think so. I mean, maybe there's some people that do, but I think I'm still pretty, down to earth. And I mean, there's,
How has your life changed?
Just
freedom. Obviously, you can buy these ranches.
Freedom, and being able to put, my passion into, and I had a deer season last year that I don't think has ever been done before on your own land, free range deer.
And what happened?
I killed 5 just absolute monster deer, between Kansas, Oklahoma, and my South Texas place, in a period of a month and a half. And it's not all about score, but these are monster deer that I had multiple years of history of, and I'd watched watch these deer over the years and let them get to the right age, and tracked them on trail cameras or go out and try to find them or whatever. But when they get to the right age, you get the right size, they pop.
Let me ask you something here.
Yeah.
And I've seen this. I'm not a whitetail guy.
Yeah.
Nikki and I like to hunt, elk.
Sure.
And I think we've spoken about that. I've always wondered how I personally feel about if I had the funds to buy my own ranch and raise these animals,
Yep.
and eventually kill them when they get to a record size. Mm-hmm. Are we killing our pets?
They're wild, and some of them are easier to kill than others, and it just, like, whitetail are smart, and every time I kill a big whitetail, I'm amazed. Like, I'm like, there's people in the industry and that are whitetail hunters that they have the confidence. They see it. They have a picture of a big deer. They're going to kill that thing. Well, I'm always wondering what's going to go wrong. Is he going to break? Is he going to get killed by a neighbor?
So you're saying that you cannot domesticate these animals?
No, no. And every once in a while, you'll have one that has a they all have different personalities. They all do different things. A lot of them are nocturnal. And if one of them has if I can find one every time I go out, if it's a big deer, and that happens sometimes, I'll decide, okay, I'm bow hunting this deer. It wouldn't be right to go out there and rifle hunt them, even if there's a rifle precious. Yeah. And so I'll go out there and try to bow hunt them. And so every animal's different. Every one of them has their own personality, and every one of them seem to be fairly damn smart.
Yeah.
And it amazes me every time I kill one or walk up on one after a hunt. It just blows me away that everything finally came together, because I don't have the personality that thinks everything's going to come together. There are people out there that do.
Right.
I don't.
You're a realist.
Yeah.
Where do you're getting ready to go into this big sheep hunt?
Mm-hmm.
How do you put the scale together? You've got big tarpon winning these big tournaments with Rob. You cut your teeth, in South Texas, but now you have these big whitetails. You have your own ranches. You're hunting, these big Dall sheep. I think you're going on a Dall sheep hunt.
Yeah, the one coming up is it's same genus species, but it's a stone sheep in British Columbia.
So if you put these out on a board,
mm-hmm.
how do you assess your emotions with all of these? Because it's kind of hard to compare apples to oranges, but
it is, and you don't have time to do it all. And I love elk hunting. I hope to do elk hunting, every other year or every third year or whatever, but you can't do it all. I like hunting anything or fishing for anything, but you got to pick what you're passionate about. And for me, like I tell my 10-year-old Charlie, it's whitetail, quail. I've really gotten into quail hunting and I didn't understand quail hunting for the longest time. My granddad was a big quail hunter, and my dad was a quail hunter when he had these really good bird dogs, and there were quail everywhere in Texas. And now quail are harder to come by. It's not as many opportunities for wild quail. But luckily, this place I have in southern Kansas is just great for wild quail, and I love it. And I like the exercise. Whitetail hunting, you're not doing anything. You're sitting there waiting for a deer. I love it also, but it's not active. But getting out and doing 25, 30,000 steps a day behind dogs, watching these English pointers point the birds, seeing the covey rise, I've really gotten into that a lot over the last, 5 or 8 years, somewhere in there. But
I mentioned this to you when we were hiking the other day, and for the people that are listening that might be quail hunters, Guy Valdine, who produced the movie Tarpon back in the 60s out of Key West. I think a lot of people know that film. They're going to reenact it this year with Yeti. Reenact it. I'm not sure if that's the proper.
Is it a documentary style?
I think that's right. My buddy Scott that works at Yeti's involved in it, and he's kind of told me about it. But I think they're kind of going back and doing a documentary on the making of Tarpon.
And with these
and interviewing these
guys,
yes.
Tom McGuane.
Yeah.
So anybody that likes to hunt quail, which I'm not a quail hunter, but all these guys were writers, and they gravitated to Key West. There's a great book called Mile Marker Zero. That's the title of it. Read that book. That is the ground zero of tarpon fishing. But also, too, Guy Valdine, he's a quail guy. And he bought this big plantation, a farm now, and he has written this book called A Handful of Feathers. And it is a fabulous read about somebody who's got great passion for all these animals and the game on this piece of property, and how he cultivates this monster piece of property for the purpose of raising quail.
Yeah.
And what is it about quail that brought you to compete against stone sheep?
Well, I think it's just it's hard to explain. And to me, it was just a bird. Back when I was into deer, I would have friends that spent all this money. Deer hunting's expensive, quail hunting's expensive in general.
Sure.
There's ways to do it without spending a lot of money, but I didn't understand going out and every bird looks the same. It didn't. I wanted these, deer antlers and stuff like that.
Bigness.
Yeah. But once 2014, I got invited on a quail hunt and got to see the dogs work and got to understand it. And I'd always been a bird hunter, considered myself a fairly good shotgun shot at doves and stuff like that. But I think what I was missing was the whole, the dog aspect, watching the dogs work, watching the retrieves of whether it's a lab or a little English cocker, digging out a quail that ran into a hole underneath the log or whatever. I think that the relationship with the dogs and how good they are and what that adds to it is what I was missing in the quail, and just being outside and being active and something different than deer hunting, where my style of deer hunting, I don't have to be very active. The quail hunting's a lot of walking, a lot of beautiful country, making a great shot. You remember these shots, and that's what I like about the sheep hunting. I don't consider myself a big sheep hunter, but I've drawn some tags and I've been able to go on some sheep hunts now. And what I like most about the sheep hunting is it takes me a little bit outside of my comfort zone. With I'm a pretty cautious guy. I'm opposite of you, probably. I'm pretty
maybe a little bit.
Yeah, like I'm not getting on a motorcycle and I'm not racing down the mountain here, but it puts me a little bit outside of my comfort zone and gives me a reason to kind of try to stay in shape and hike and lose some weight and be it because
pushes you hard.
It does. And had I not taken it so seriously on my first Dall sheep hunt that I drew a tag for in Alaska, it would have killed me out there just trying to carry a 70-pound pack back out of the mountains there. It was hard enough having lost, I lost 22 pounds to get in shape for that first sheep hunt. And I like having these hunts on the books to try to, help me try to stay in shape and try to work on my health, because
it's cool, this seasonal thing.
It is.
You got going for you.
Yeah.
When you're walking down the street and you see someone have a Yeti cup in their hand, does it make your heart feel good still?
It does. I see it all, all over.
Everywhere.
Yeah, I see it everywhere. But yeah, it always blows me away. For the longest time, we were just coolers. We were a one product company and a successful one product company. And then the cups came along and that was a combination. I found a vacuum insulated bottle that just kind of blew me away on how it hold ice. I throw it on my brother's desk. A month later, he has, 2 different size cups designed, that 20 ounce that you have and a little bit bigger 30 ounce. And we had, vacuum insulation had been around for a long time and bottles had been around, but you come out with a couple cups that people use on a daily basis and you have the distribution that Yeti does and the name brand that Yeti does. We doubled the company overnight.
It's crazy.
At the time, we were selling $150 million worth of coolers a year. And we had some arguments, internally in the company with whether or not this was a waste of time. And in 1 year, we sold $150 million worth of cups. And then after that,
that's crazy.
It is crazy.
But you know what?
Yeah.
This ice right here,
yeah,
will be here tomorrow morning.
It will. It's unbelievable. And the technology's been around forever, but we had the platform, the brand name, and then the design. There's a lot more use for cups than there is for bottles. We sell bottles now and sell a lot of them. I use them all the time. But you open up my cabinet or a lot of cabinets I go to and you see Yeti cups everywhere, Yeah.
Obviously, you're 48, and that's obvious that you're 48, but you're 48.
Yep.
Your dreams have been met 1,000 times over.
Sure.
When you're in your room at night, where does your mind go? And I'm sure it fluctuates for everybody, but what is closest to your heart at this point?
I mean, family, my kids, my parents are both still alive, doing well. I love going. I'll get down in Port O'Connor and redfish with my dad. I'll pole him around the entire time. He's 77. He loves redfish. He grew up in a time in Texas where the redfish, there weren't many redfish. And I think that's another thing that drives you. If you're doing an outdoor activity where there's some hardships, and, for me, I grew up in the Texas Hill Country where the deer were all this big. They were small, but I would read North American Whitetail and watch television and see these big deer in Kansas, Iowa, South Texas, And he grew up in, fishing in the 70s in Texas. The commercial fishing had wiped out all the redfish. And then the coastal, back then it was the Gulf Coast Conservation Association, but the CCA now, they helped bring back the redfish to Texas. And so from that time, from having spent all that time not seeing redfish and not catching them to now being able to go out and sight cast to a redfish, it just, every time he catches one, it just blows him away. And I love seeing that from the back of the boat. So I'll go out and I love spending time with him, poling him around. I stay on the poling platform all day trying to get him to sight cast to a redfish with a fly rod or a spinning rod. Doesn't matter. He just loves catching redfish, and he loves going to Kansas with me and going on a quail hunt. So
do you think your dad, being a child at heart, being a hunter and fisher, gave you the passions? I mean, because I think that you were saying in a diaper, you walked out the front door and you wanted to hunt something.
Yeah, I think it was in my blood.
It was in your blood.
And it was from my granddad to my dad, and obviously my parents were a big influence on me. My mom kind of drove me to do well in school. And I didn't use any of that other than I graduated from high school. I thought I was smart in high school, and then I got to A&M and figured out I wasn't. But that drive from my mom and seeing my dad own his own company and seeing his outdoor pursuits and how he always supported my brothers and my sister and stuff.
They were
like
living examples of how you wanted to live your life.
100%. And the weird thing about it is that, having a company like FlexCoat, like my dad has, it's a lifestyle company that put all 4 of his kids through college. What would also be like a dream of mine, back in the day. And then to have something that just went crazy beyond that, just it just kind of, blows you away every day. But for me, what keeps me up at night is thinking about my kids, spending time with my kids, spending time with my family. And then, I haven't lost any passion for, managing the land that I have now for deer and quail and catching redfish and going to the Florida Keys and seeing all that. The stuff you see out there, when you're tarpon fishing, this year I saw 1 hammerhead. I would like to see, I love seeing the hammerheads come through the tarpon, even though they're after the tarpon. But I've never seen a hammerhead kill a free swimming tarpon. And Rob tells me the stories of that and scattering the tarpon like mullet and doing circles around them and catching them. And, I want to see that kind of stuff. And every day you're out there, in the Keys fishing, you see stuff that you've never seen before. You'll have your anchor rope out, and you'll have little baby triple tails hanging out below the anchor rope, or you'll see, ray swim by doing something. You see different little fish on the bottom. You're seeing stuff all the time that it blows you away, and it's so pretty down there.
Well, what comes to mind, as you say all this, don't forget where you came from, and you haven't. You love the simple life of hunting and fishing and raising your family.
I think that's what I love, and that's what I care about now, and can't replicate anything like Yeti, and so have no desire to do it again. I just want to work with my kids and work with these ranches and the people that I work with, and I've surrounded myself with great people on these ranches also. And
it was crazy. I think Yeti, the success is a byproduct of having fun.
It is 100%. It is
because you're hunting and fishing. You have a cooler, and you decide to make a better one.
Yeah, it is 100% based on seeing my dad own his own company, knowing we want to do that. We weren't trying to do something like Yeti, but we put ourselves in the position where it was possible.
Right,
and we stumbled across a market that was so big that we could have never predicted what it was going to do.
Right.
My last question is, what did you learn most from your dad during the transition period from when he quit teaching to go full-time, selling flex?
So all this is more
work ethic?
Maybe.
But I think work ethic comes from love and passion.
It does.
Right?
Yeah.
Because you're not going to have great work ethic all the time if you hate what you're doing.
No, for sure.
So you got to have it's a byproduct of chasing your heart, chasing your dreams.
So you got to remember, I was young when he made that transition.
Okay.
So I was very young. I do remember, going up to the wood shop with him when he was, teaching that. And I remember the early days of FlexCoat and going to these trade shows. And, I guess, what I remember most was seeing him run a small business and knowing that's what I want to do. And I couldn't imagine working for anybody else. From the time I was in middle school and I needed extra money to do something, it was I wanted to build fishing rods, and I wanted to be involved in the outdoor industry. And, his company was a great example for us to see how to run a business, all the different little functional areas. He was answering the phone. He was paying bills. My mom was working on the books, seeing all that growing up and being exposed to the industry that you loved. I mean, it was like, it was unbelievable. And to see what that company was able to do for his kids and his family. and it's not a big company, but it's a real niche, but it was a neat thing to be a part of,
Well, you are
It's an amazing story.
You're a good man. Very inspirational in a lot of ways. And what I love mostly about you and what I've heard is that you came from a family, filled with hunting and fishing passions, chasing your heart to own your own company and do well for your family. And you hit that home run, but you're still, now that you have what you have, you're managing properties. You're still chasing your heart and helping the environment and chasing animals and fish.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a dream come true at 48, bro.
It really is.
Congratulations.
I'm envious.
Me too.
Well, I've enjoyed getting to know you guys over the years, and I appreciate what y'all are doing with this podcast. And I was telling you, Andy, about, I listen to these, downloading them before I get on a plane going somewhere, and I've enjoyed listening to these stories. I've listened to about half of them, and I hope to listen to all of them. But to capture these stories before they disappear, and it's like you said, it's different than a magazine article. And you see these guys, these older guys, dying off down in the Keys. And to capture some of these stories before they disappear, it's really meant a lot to me and to everybody down there and in this sport that we love, the tarpon fishing and all that. And I appreciate what y'all are doing.
Their stories are invaluable. They should not go away, and we're just trying to save them.
Yeah.
And yours too.
Yep. Thank you.
Thanks, pal.
Thanks so much, Ryan. Appreciate it, man.
Awesome hanging with you.
Enjoyed it. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Good luck on your sheep hunt.
I appreciate it.
All right, dog.
West Side Story. Well, so it's just a